Hey guys, it's Candace.
And it's Elena.
And you're listening to Cousins on Crime. Pretend it's our 100th episode because we have a little bit of an announcement on this episode. We just weren't quite ready last week, and that happens.
Yeah, it's okay.
It's our show. We can do what we want.
Exactly.
Okay. So in honor of our 100th episode last week, we have launched our own, I can't believe I'm about to say this, Cousins on Crime Patreon. Whoop, 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 whoop. And merch store. So we have a couple subscription options for the Patreon that will include like additional full-length bonus episodes every month and brand new current event episodes, which I've talked about this before, how much I want to talk about current event episodes. So we're going to do that on our Patreon.
It's happening. And we'll talk about cases that haven't been litigated yet. Like we talked about, we did a current events case on Corey Richins and the murder of Eric Richins. The alleged murder. I guess I better start putting that into my vocabulary. Alleged. Gotta be politically correct.
So it'll be cool to, discuss those cases with you guys as they unfold.
Mm-hmm.
We will be adding more bits as we get them. Like videoed interviews that we've done and we will do in the future, and future projects that we might have coming up. We have dreams.
Yes.
We have dreams. We don't have the time to do the dreams, but maybe someday we will have the time, and maybe we're working slowly on towards that.
Yes.
That's
the goal.
That's the goal. And, we are so excited to finally give you guys bonus content. We've been doing this for 2 years now, 100 episodes in, and we've talked about this probably since we started the podcast. But in order to give you the extras that you're paying for, we have to be able to provide you like quality content, and we haven't been able to do that until now. So sign up today and you'll have our full catalog plus 2 bonus episodes waiting for you.
So exciting.
Yes, we are excited. Also, our new merch is, can I just say, kind of awesome.
Yeah, y'all are going to love it.
So we have an evidence bag tote that you can put all your evidence in, all your bits and pieces. We have new artwork designed by me.
Yes, Candace worked really hard on that.
And lots of items to choose from.
Yes.
One of my favorites is the Retro Cousins glass.
That is great. That is a really cool piece.
I mean, it just says, pour iced coffee in me, is what it says to me. And I will be doing such a thing.
Or some iced peach tea.
Ooh, or some lemonade.
Oh, yeah.
You could put anything you want in it.
Nice and refreshing.
Mm-hmm. So check out the show notes. I will link our Patreon and our merch store, and follow us on Instagram to see photos of our merch and updates about merch and Patreon. Woo! 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 Now that's over.
That was a lot of news, Candace.
That was so much news. I feel like I'm an anchor right now. So yeah, do you have anything that you want to talk about before we...
No, I think that was plenty to start our day.
That was plenty, wasn't it?
Yeah.
All right. Well, the case I have for you in this episode is very gruesome.
Oh, no.
We're going to talk about some really tough stuff here.
Oh.
So just know that going into it, if you're not in a good headspace, this isn't the one for you.
Okay.
Okay, I'll see you later. I'll let you talk by yourself.
Okay, bye. I will say, though, as in last week's episode, we do have a survivor.
Okay.
In today's story. So thankfully, there is something good.
Okay. That's what I
to
like.
speak of.
I like to look at the good. Let's do that.
So our victim, Jeffrey Lee Wolfe, was born in Houston, Texas on November 29th, 1974. Jeffrey's dad, Pascal Wolfe, said that Jeffrey loved football, and dogs, and pretty girls. Jeffrey was just a guy's guy. Pascal called him an all-American guy.
Aww.
And he went with the flow, which is why at 21 years old, he wasn't too surprised when Jeffrey showed up at his dad's house with a new girlfriend, Brooke Weber, and informed him that they'd be heading out of town for a few days.
Oh, okay.
Pascal was like, all right, kid, nice to meet you, Brooke. You kids have fun. You know? Brooke remembered feeling sparks when she first met Jeffrey. He was cute and there was something electric about him that she was immediately drawn to, which is why she decided to accompany him on this quick trip to Mississippi just a few weeks after they began dating.
Wow.
She's like, I just want to spend all the time with you.
Yeah, just be spontaneous.
Yeah.
I like it.
She admitted, she was 18 years old. She was fearless. She's like, what could go wrong?
Right.
But you know what? There was something about her too. Jeffrey saw it. And when Jeffrey introduced her to his dad, he saw it too. It was more than a spark. It was like a fire.
Oh.
A fire that would serve her well because she really had no idea what she was getting herself into.
Oh my goodness.
So August 11th, 1996, Jeffrey and Brooke left Houston around 4 p.m. to set off on their little road trip to Moss Point, Mississippi. This trip wasn't a romantic vacation for the couple. They were going to try to have fun on the trip, but the main reason they were making such a journey was that Jeffrey needed to collect some money from his buddy Gary Simmons and Gary's ex-brother-in-law, Timothy Milano. They both owed him money for drugs.
Oh, no.
I wasn't able to find the exact amount, but the case file reported that it was anywhere between $12,000 and $20,000. I think only Jeremy could attest. Yeah, it's a lot of money for drugs back in the 90s.
Yeah.
So I think only Jeremy could really say how much it actually was. The Lovebirds arrived in Pascagoula, Mississippi in the wee hours of the morning and crashed at the King's Inn Hotel. It was about 10 minutes from their final destination of Moss Point. They got some rest and Jeffrey went to see his friend Sonny Milano, the brother of Timothy Milano, who owed him money.
Okay.
Jeffrey didn't have beef with Sonny. It was just his brother. It's like, no fault for you. He actually had a good time with Sonny that day. Sonny worked at a tire store and he and Jeffrey talked about maybe getting Jeffrey some new tires for his truck and maybe some rims. Later that evening, Jeffrey and Brooke went on a double date with Sonny and his fiance to Shoney's, as you do. And then the two couples parted ways back at the motel. A few hours later, after going to Gary's house a couple times to find no one home, Jeffrey and Brooke headed back over to Gary Simmons' home after getting a call from Sonny that Gary was back home and expecting them. I guess Sonny had talked to Gary on the phone and was like, oh yeah, they've been by a couple times and you weren't home. And he's like, well, tell him I'm home. So Sonny called and said, he's home. And they went. Now, as soon as they pulled up to Gary's house, Brooke just felt like something was off. The porch light wasn't on.
Oh.
At face value, this may not strike you listeners as odd. But when Lena and I were kids, we used to go to Mississippi every year to see our family. And we'd often arrive at Mama and Papa's house super late because we'd been driving all day. And no matter how late we got there, the porch light was on.
Yes.
That's what country folks do.
Yeah.
If you don't leave the porch light on, it's pitch black.
Yeah, exactly.
Sometimes you can't even see the house. It's just a black void of trees and you just can't see anything at night.
Well, Gary didn't have his porch light on, and they knew he was expecting them. But it wasn't until they pulled closer to the house that that weird feeling Brooke initially had was amplified because they saw that Gary was sitting on the front porch.
Oh, no.
Brooke remembered how she began to reason with herself. Okay, that's weird, but maybe maybe it's
he
broken.
Just forgot to flip it on real quick.
Right. Maybe he just stepped outside. Maybe he saw us coming and just stepped outside. Maybe it's broken. This is Jeffrey's friend. Like, what am I? And she convinced herself that she was just being a little skittish. The three went into the home, Gary, Brooke, and Jeffrey, where they exchanged introductions and pleasantries before settling into the kitchen for a chat. Brooke was sitting at the dining table rolling a joint, while Gary and Jeffrey talked, and everything seemed to be cordial. There was no arguing and shouting, and then suddenly, deafening gunshots rang out.
What?
She looked up just as Jeffrey fell to the ground.
Oh, my God.
And she saw another man standing in the doorway. It was Timothy Milano. Timothy Milano was a friend of Jeffrey's that had actually introduced Jeffrey and Gary. So there was that drug connection there.
Right. Okay.
She later told police that she didn't even know that Timothy was there at the home that night. She just thought it was the three of them.
Like he had been just hanging out in a bedroom or hiding somewhere.
Yeah, something like that. She felt ambush, like it was an ambush.
Yeah.
And before she could even think about what was happening, Greg rushed her and drug her out of the kitchen, kicking and screaming into another room where he put her in a metal box.
A metal box?
Yes.
What?
He shut the lid and locked her inside.
Was this just a normal thing? Let me have this metal box here just to put people in if I need to? What the heck?
Yep. She described the box as one of those like army surplus boxes.
Okay.
And all she could really do was lay there and pray. She said she prayed to God, save me. I don't want to die. Let me live. She was only 18. She had her whole life life of possibilities before her. Then she heroically escaped.
Oh.
Detective Lee Merrill received a dispatch call from a young woman hysterically crying that her boyfriend had been shot. So he arrived on scene shortly thereafter to meet with her and get more details. He could hardly get any information from her because she was really hard to understand through the tears and the trembling. But she pointed to a house down the street and said that that was the house that her boyfriend was shot in. But when Detective Merrill and his backup went to check it out, there was no one there.
Oh, no.
No one was home and no body was there.
What did they do with them?
No blood indicating that someone had been shot. They probably thought that they were in the wrong house at first, but she was adamant it was that house. And then they might have thought she's high or something. And she might be making all of this up. But there was so much conviction in her voice and her whole demeanor was shaken. And they knew something really did happen to this woman. As Detective Merrill and his team of investigators searched the desolate home that was believed to be the scene of a crime, they turned their sights outside because the inside was really clean. Not like the residence was kept tidy, because it wasn't. More like someone had cleaned the house from top to bottom.
So she was in the box the whole time until she just like got up.
Yeah, and I'll tell you about that in a minute.
I'm get there.
Can you imagine if I was like, yeah, she escaped, the end.
I know, I'm like, but I need more. I need details.
So the backyard had like an old table and some chairs and like debris that it looked like, you know, I don't want to generalize, but you know, if you have a lot of land, you may have a pile of crap out in the yard.
Especially
like,
in Mississippi.
Yeah, exactly.
Sorry to say.
I mean, if you don't have room for it and you don't have storage, you might just discard it and like burn it later or something like that.
Yeah.
That's generally how the country folk get rid of stuff, in a burn pile. So they saw this debris, and the house had actually backed up to water. So they saw some boats sitting out there.
Oh.
And the investigators approached the debris pile. They saw an axe and a machete.
Oh.
that had what appeared to be blood on them. And when Detective Merrill walked over to the boats, one of them had blood and tissue inside.
Oh. Wow.
He knew they were dealing with a homicide.
Here you go. She was telling the truth, guys.
Yeah. Not only that, but it was pretty clear to them where they should be looking for Jeffrey.
Yeah.
So they loaded up in their own boat and they headed into the bayou to begin looking for Jeffrey.
Oh my gosh.
This is tough. Almost immediately, they began finding human remains. I say finding because Jeffrey was in pieces.
Oh my Lord.
Really small pieces.
Jesus.
His remains had been cut up and dumped in the bayou in hopes that alligators and other animal life therein would eat the evidence, leaving no trace of what had occurred or who the victim was.
Seems like the perfect.
Seems like it.
Yeah.
They bagged each of the remains in multiple white garbage bags, filling the boat, and then they came upon Jeffrey's head.
Oh.
Detective Merrill described lifting it out of the water by the hair and staring into Jeffrey's eyes, and how that moment would never leave him.
No, ma'am.
Just think about that for a second. The implication of Jeffrey's murder and the desecration of his remains and how far-reaching that became.
Yeah.
Beyond the impact on his family, because that's obvious, the team of investigators tasked with collecting his remains, all of them signed up for this job, right?
Oh, well, yeah.
But on a human level, no one truly could ever be prepared to lift someone else's head out of the water like something out of a horror movie.
Right. Oh, I can't even imagine it.
Dr. Paul McGarry, a forensic pathologist, and George Sherman, the Jackson County coroner, were on scene to aid in the recovery of Jeffrey's remains. Now, I'm going to read an excerpt from the opinion written by Judge Halil Ozardin. I hope I'm saying that right. With regard to the collection of Jeffrey's remains, because there's just no way for me to reword this.
Okay.
So I'm just going to read it. Listener discretion advised. So, quote, they retrieved skin, tissue, muscle, pieces of chest and abdomen walls, lungs and heart, a liver, fingers, toes, and sexual organs, of all of which bore marks of precision cutting. One of the pieces of skin had a gunshot wound. Another piece had 5 gunshot wounds.
Oh.
There were bullet holes through the heart, the lungs, and a bullet was recovered from the left lung. On the second day, searchers found Wolfe's head, which had been severed just below the jaw, in the middle of the bayou. In total, about 150 pounds of flesh and tissue were recovered, but not the entire body. In his examination of the fingers and toes, McGarry noted that slashes had been made across the pads, apparently to prevent fingerprint identification. Tattoo marks on the skin had also been slashed. McGarry testified at trial that the bullet wounds had occurred while Wolfe was still alive, but the remaining injuries included those inflicted by hatchet or cleaver, and other by bolt cutter occurred after death. Examination of the skin in which the bullet holes were found, as well as the t-shirt Wolfe was wearing on the night he was murdered, indicated that he was shot at least 5 times in the back. There was another wound, but it was not clear from either the skin wound or the bullet holes in the t-shirt whether the shot came from the front or the back. 2 other holes in the shirt appeared to be bullet holes, one along the side of the chest and one under the left arm. End quote.
That is so much going on. I mean,
I can't believe they got all that.
That's what I'm over here thinking, like finding all of these pieces and parts in.
And you know, they I remember one of the interviews, one of the detectives said that the largest piece they found was like 3 by 5.
Wow.
3 by 5 inches. That's how small the pieces were cut.
But they're his organs, like, that's amazing.
Yeah. Let me take a drink. I need to wet my beak. Jeffrey's father, Pascal, described the way he found out his son was dead from a late night visit from a couple of police officers who didn't say much, just handed him a piece of paper with a phone number to call.
No way.
The number was for the Jackson County coroner, telling him his son had been murdered.
Why couldn't they just tell him face to face?
I don't know.
What?
That was no doubt a shock to the system. But then he learned how he died and the aftermath that occurred. He was packing his bag to head to Mississippi to meet with police and bring his son's body home when his brother stopped by. Pascal's brother sat next to him on the bed, put his hand on his shoulder, and he said, "They're not going to let you see him."
Oh my gosh.
And Pascal said, "No one is going to stop me from seeing my son." And his brother said, "You don't understand. They chopped him up into pieces and they're still looking for his remains."
Oh my gosh.
I can't imagine any parent having to come to terms with that statement right there.
No, that's wow. And to be the brother to tell him.
There was just nothing he could do at that point but just crumple over and just bawl and cry.
I want to cry for him right now.
While investigators were on the hunt for the rest of Jeffrey's remains and now looking for Gary and Timothy, they spoke with Brooke again, this time at the station, because it's not every day you have a survivor of the case that you're investigating and such a horrific crime.
Yeah.
What she described is very difficult to listen to. So trigger warning here. We're going to talk about sexual assault for just a minute.
Oh no.
So after being left alone, locked up in the box for some time after she was initially put in there, she heard footsteps slowly approaching and then stopped right next to the box. She was terrified when the lid opened and she saw Gary. He pulled her from the box and explained that he was going to sexually assault her and she better make it good.
Oh my gosh.
Because her life depended on it.
What a disgusting human.
Yeah. She complied and she was raped and put back in the box, hogtied and locked up. After this, she'd been in the box for a while. She doesn't know how long because it's not like she had a clock in there with her or calendar or, the sands of time. And trauma has a way of distorting time and space.
Right.
She said she ended up falling asleep at one point in the box and she was awoken by a phone ringing. It rang and it rang and then the voicemail picked up and whoever was calling left a message. It was quiet in the house. And she thought, are they gone? Am I alone here? And she knew this was her moment.
Wow.
She thought, I mentioned a minute ago, she was hogtied with a rope.
Yeah.
But she was a country girl, okay? And she's like, y'all are going to have to do better than these knots.
Uh-oh.
So she was able to untie herself.
You go, girl.
Because she said their knots were she. Yeah, that's what she said in the interview. She was small and she had room to move around in that box. So she rolled over and placed her back up against the lid of the box with her knees tucked underneath her, and she began to thrust her back against the lid as hard as she could muster. She pounded and pounded away at that lid, rattling that metal box and the lock that kept her freedom until she felt the lid give way.
Oh, wow.
The sound of the broken hinges and locks hitting the ground was followed by silence. She panicked for a second.
Yeah.
She thought, am I alone? Like, did they hear me? Are they on their way to come get me? She slowly opened the lid and began to climb out one leg, then two, all while taking in the room where she had been held. The silence hung in the air as she looked around the clean space where the box lay. No blood, no Jeffrey, and no Gary. Nearby, she saw a bag of clothes that she had taken from her, and she also saw her jewelry. She grabbed it, and she ran. She threw her body forward, out of the room, down the hall, grabbed a butcher's knife on the way out the door. She dashed across the street towards a house that she'd remember being close by. She ferociously knocked on that neighbor's door and in one breath said Gary Simmons had killed her friend and begged her to call police. The lady obliged, but didn't want Brooke to come inside.
Oh.
By now, the sun had come up, and the light of day had illuminated the horrors written all over Brooke's face.
No.
And I can imagine this woman was probably like, let me get you some help, sweetie.
Yeah.
So
Please.
Brooke was asked to wait for police on the front porch swing. And as she sat there waiting, she saw Gary pull back into his driveway.
No. Did he see her?
No. She crouched behind some shrubbery so that he wouldn't see her.
Oh.
And she watched as he entered the house. She stayed there frozen and shaking, unwilling to move for fear that he would come and get her. And as she probably guessed, he was not in that house long because he realized she was gone.
Oh.
He ran out of that house and sped away in his car. And only then did she feel like she could catch her breath.
Oh.
And with that, she was saved. Shortly after reaching the lady's house, she was in the protective custody of police. And now she had finished telling her harrowing tale. At that point, they left her in the interview room to regroup, talk amongst themselves. And then she overheard some investigators speaking about finding Jeffrey's remains.
Oh.
Because up until now, she had no idea where he was or what had happened to him. They talked about finding his body parts.
Oh.
And that's how she found out the true horror of what she had really witnessed that night.
So sad.
They asked if she could identify him
Absolutely.
to spare his family from having to, and she agreed, which I think is amazing of her to do. They showed her a photo of a man's head floating in water, and she confirmed that that was Jeffrey. It was only now that her eyes were opened to what she survived. The sick and depraved man, Gary Simmons, that had been a butcher at a local grocery store, had now butchered her new boyfriend and would have no doubt done the same thing to her.
Oh, right. When he was done using her.
Yeah, that's right. Gary was a butcher at a local grocery store in town. Terrifying.
Yeah.
Now, investigators were anxious to get this scumbag off the street. I mean, he'd killed someone. Why wouldn't he do it again?
Right.
Well, they never expected in a million years to get a phone call from Gary wanting to turn himself in.
What?
But that's exactly what happened next. After the murder, Gary had made a confession tape for his wife and children. Yes, the guy was married with a whole family. And then he went to his friend Dennis's house. Gary told Dennis what he did in detail, and Dennis convinced him to turn himself into authorities.
Well, thank you, Dennis.
Thanks, Dennis. He was picked up, read his rights, and he didn't want to talk to them at the time. Now, let me tell you about this confession tape that he made. It made my stomach turn, what I saw of it anyway.
Okay.
You can view a clip of it. They did an episode on the Investigation Discovery channel. They have a show called Shattered, and they did an episode on this case. And they played a little bit of it. It's about 26 minutes in, and I'll link it in the show notes. The tape is Gary sitting in front of a camera in a black t-shirt with his hair real 90s, hair sprayed into place, with a balled up fist resting on his hip. He's mic'd up, and there's a beige and blue watercolor effect background. Just think like school picture day or
Olin
something
Mills.
like that. Yeah, Olin Mills. Oh my God. So he made this video at a shopping mall.
Oh, what?
You know, in the day and age where you could go to the mall and get like glamour shots or make a confession video, apparently. Anyway, this video at first glance looks like he's about to give a spiel like for a dating show or something. Like he's about to share his interests and maybe his occupation. But instead, he said, quote, "I guess it's a real mess, isn't it? It wasn't supposed to go like that. I don't know what to tell you. To my way of thinking, I didn't have much of a choice. I mean, I'd already taken his money." End quote.
Oh, so, yeah. his life isn't much more.
I mean, he already took his
important.
money.
Right. So why not just take his life?
Right. So after his son's death, Pascal was at the lowest point in his life, you can imagine. He soothed his pain with alcohol and stayed numb
Pascal.
with any bottle he could get his hands on. He grew filled with rage that he'd buried his child. No one should have to bury their child. He loaded his gun and took it with him to the courthouse, and he planned to kill both men that took his son away from him.
Oh, no.
He didn't care about the consequences. He didn't care if police shot and killed him to stop him from firing. He was in so much pain, and he just wanted it to end by any means necessary. But by the grace of God, when the door opened for Jeremy's murderers to enter the courtroom, only Gary Simmons was let in. And Pascal asked an officer nearby, "Where's the other one? Where's Timmy?" And he said, "Well, he's not coming today. They're being tried separately." Pascal said to himself, "Well, what good is one without the other?"
Okay.
So,
because if he does one, then he won't be able to get to the second one.
Exactly. So he left his gun in his coat pocket. He sat through the day's court proceedings. And he maintains that he would have shot both men that day had they both been there. And he will not apologize for it.
Wow.
He said, "That's how I felt that day. I would have done it." Now, you see, he knew Timothy Milano. Did you catch that he called him Timmy?
Timmy, I did catch that.
Jeffrey had introduced Timothy to his dad months prior and said, "Do you mind if he stays with us here for a while?"
Oh, no.
Until he gets back on his feet. And Pascal opened his home to him.
Of course he did.
Pascal fed him, took him to the grocery store, and gave him a safe place to rest his head for 3 weeks. And this is how he repays his kindness.
Wow.
This is how he repays Jeffrey's kindness.
Low, low, low.
Now, at the trial for Gary, the star witness was Brooke. Without her testimony, the case fell short of a slam dunk. She was young and she was traumatized, and worst of all, Gary had sent her death threats from prison. So she was real scared. But she was a hero. She mustered up that fire that she had in her, and she got up on that stand. She told Investigation Discovery that she saw Jeffrey's parents there, and she thought, if they can sit through this, so can I.
Yeah.
She endured the excruciating questioning and gave the details of her kidnapping and rape and the witness of Jeffrey's murder and her harrowing escape. And the jury was captivated. Other witnesses took the stand to bolster the state's case. Gary's co-worker, Charles Jenkins, testified that he worked with Gary on August 12th, 1996. That was the day that Jeffrey and Brooke made it into town.
Oh, okay.
Charles worked at Wayne Lee's grocery store with Gary that particular day. After Gary's shift was over of cutting meat all day, he sharpened his knives.
Oh.
He wrapped them in paper and took them with him.
He was premeditating.
Thank you very much. Charles told the court he found it odd because usually someone doesn't take their materials home with them.
Oh.
And he asked Gary, "Where are you going with them knives?" And Gary told him something to the effect of, "I might have to skin something later."
Okay.
Another valuable witness at Gary's trial was Gary's neighbor, Rita Taylor. She testified that around 3 or 4 a.m. in the morning of August 13th, she'd just finished doing some cleaning. Hey, you got to clean when you can, I say. She finished cleaning and she ran out to her car to put something in there when she saw Gary and Timothy carrying white buckets to the bayou. And she took note of it because Gary had asked to borrow her husband's boat the day before.
Oh.
So she's like, I wonder what he's doing with the boat. So she was paying attention. And she's like, what are the buckets for at 3 and 4 a.m.? Like, what is that all about? So on August 29th, 1997, Gary Simmons was convicted of kidnapping, rape, and capital murder with the underlying felony of robbery and sentenced to life in prison for the kidnapping and rape charges, and the court imposed death for the capital murder charge. He appealed multiple times. They were all rejected. The reason for the robbery charge was that Jeffrey had about $1,200 on him, and Brooke had like $100, and he stole their money.
Right.
I mean, that's the least of what he did to them, but slap him with the charges, I say. So that money was never recovered. Timothy Milano, his trial was the same generally. He got life without parole for his efforts in the murder and 30 years for the kidnapping. Now, it was said that Gary offered Brooke to him
to
have his turn, but he declined. How noble.
Right.
His sentences are to run consecutively, which means forever. Now, after the trials, Brooke changed her name, cut off all her hair, dyed it from blonde to deep brown.
Oh.
She basically went into hiding. I mean, she was still very scared of Gary Simmons.
Oh.
And she knew if he was going to threaten her life during the pre-trial phase, he was probably real pissed now.
Oh, yeah.
That he's on death row. Gary was executed on June 10th, 2012 by lethal injection. Too good for him, if you ask me. Jeremy's parents attended the execution, and when it was over, his dad Pascal stood up and said, "Hell yeah," and left.
Oh my goodness.
I can't imagine having to sit there and watch your son's murderer die peacefully.
Right. As you know, he was cut up in little pieces.
I can't imagine that brings you much solace to know that he's dead, considering the way Jeremy was killed. But I truly hope that at least he can feel a bit of relief, knowing that Gary's burning in the lake of fire right now.
Well, yeah. Yeah.
And, from what I can tell, Brooke has gotten on with her life. I don't know what her current name is now, but for her protection, I didn't look.
Right.
She still seems very, very traumatized by the events, even all these decades later, talking about it.
Wow.
Yeah. I bet she has a peace knowing that he's dead and he can never.
Oh, I'm sure. 'Cause who does he think he is? You've already traumatized her so much, and then you're going to threaten her from your cell.
The video of Gary Simmons, he looks like somebody your dad might have been friends with.
Wow.
He looks like somebody that you just grew up knowing. You know what I mean? He just looks familiar. He looks normal. He looks just like somebody you might have known.
Yeah. The local butcher.
The local butcher.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
Yeah.
I'm so impressed by Brooke that she fought back, and she was so smart to listen to the details of, nobody else is here.
Exactly.
And she ran and got help, and it was quick enough for them to get out on the water and find.
That's what I'm thinking, because there were alligators. It was infested. It was a bayou.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a straight up bayou with alligators, and the alligators probably did eat some of his remains.
I'm sure.
Which is why they were not able to locate them. But the fact that they got out there so quickly and were able to recover 150 pounds of him. I think his dad said his son was 170 pounds.
That's so impressive to me, how quick they were able to do all that.
I think that was amazing police work right there.
Right.
They believed her, even though all signs pointed to nothing's happened here.
Yeah.
Until they said, let's take a closer look. Let's go outside.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's so, so sad. I cannot even imagine what she went through. And
I'm so sorry that she had to endure that. But I'm proud of her for her actions and being strong to be able to, testify and all of that. And I'm going to be praying for her that she has peace in her life. I pray that for her. Well, thank you for telling their story, Candace.
It was tough. That was a tough one. And I know, it was tough to research, but I know it was tough to listen to. So y'all go, just take your brain out, put it in the dishwasher, put it on pots and pans, just get a cleanse somehow.
Yeah.
Go watch a comedy. Go watch Blockers. That is such a funny movie.
Blockers.
Oh my gosh, it's so funny. Go watch Step Brothers. There's a lot of funny stuff out there just to cleanse your palate.
Mm-hmm.
So thanks for listening.
Thank you. That was great. Let's do it again sometime.
Let's do it again.
Okay.
Don't forget our Patreon and our merch store, guys.
Check it out.
We'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you for listening to Cousins on Crime. If you're enjoying our podcast, please consider leaving us a positive review and rating. To make sure you never miss an episode, subscribe to our show.
You can also follow us on Instagram at Cousins on Crime Podcast or send case suggestions to cousinsoncrime@gmail.com.